Greetings and salutations. Thank you for joining us. We've got an exciting episode for you, and this is Embrace Your Storm. My name is Johnny Nato, and we actually have a slightly different episode for you, which I'm excited because we've had a lot of musicians on it, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a musician myself, but there's lots of other creative outlets out there. And so today I have on Doug Wagner, and he is you're not a comic book artist. You're more of like the storyteller, right, Doug? Is that what?
Yeah, I would consider myself a comic book writer.
Writer. There you go. So Doug, thanks for coming on.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. So Doug, I get to ask you the first question, regardless of your creative outlet. So how did you find writing, or what brought you to comics and or writing as how did you find that as your creative outlet?
Oh man, I mean that's it all goes way back to being a little kid.
Mm,
Kind of started out, uh, you know, being a weird little kid and always kind of like playing in my own head and daydreaming. And back then you don't realize you're writing. You're just playing.
that's true. Yeah, yeah,
And so I
yeah.
was creating characters and worlds and everything for me to kind of play with. And started out my parents started me in kindergarten at 4, so I was always the youngest and smallest. And so kind of
Right.
like, but always, it's hard to admit it to myself now, but I was always a little less mature than everybody else. So I kind of had to spend some time kind of playing by myself in the playgrounds and that kind of stuff. um and then over the years, kind of bumped into comics at a 7-Eleven. My mom and dad were divorced when I was 2, so I don't even remember
Mm,
them married. And he'd pick
mm.
me up every weekend, and on the way to his place, we'd always stop by 7-Eleven, and it was like Slurpee time and whatever else I wanted to get. And kind of bumped into that old school spinner rack and found a Casper comic and started kind of reading that, and that kind of got me started on my comic book reading journey and just
That's
loved
funny.
it. Just
That's
fell in
funny.
love. Um,
Do you remember what exactly about it? Was it the pictures, or was it kind of everything, the way it was presented? Can you kind of remember, you're just like, oh man, this is so cool.
Yeah, I mean it was definitely, like the art, and then the reading was at my level, and I'd
Mm,
been with reading at that point, didn't really care about school.
I
It's
hear
like
you. Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah.
yeah. So really had a hard time with reading and stuff, and the fact that there was little reading to do and more visual storytelling going on, it kind of helped me kind of embrace reading a little bit.
I
And
hear
it was
you.
that perfect mix of like, hey, I don't have to read an entire paragraph to get the idea of what's going on in this panel. They're just kind of
Mm,
showing it to me.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
No, so Casper and stuff, you stumbled into that first, so I'm assuming at some point you kind of fell into, Spider-Man, Superman, stuff like that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember the day. I still remember this. Like I walked into the store and there was a Fantastic Four cover that had Silver Surfer on it.
Oh, there you
I
go.
was like, man, that's like a really weird looking character. I got to check this out. And so read it, had Doctor Doom in it, like fell instantly in love with superheroes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then, just kind of branched out into like whatever, at that age, you don't really necessarily follow one book. You're like, you go to the stand and whatever looks exciting, you pick it up.
Exactly.
You
Exactly. Yeah,
know,
yeah, no, totally. So were you like 10, 11, 12? Were you kind of around that age?
I was probably a little bit younger, probably like 7 or 8.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Do you still have a lot of the comics that you got from back then?
Oh no, unfortunately not.
Oh
Yeah, you kind of
man.
wish we kept all that stuff. But I remember there was a time where I had so many that I decided that I was gonna like set up a stand out front of my dad's house and sell them for a quarter, and I did pretty well.
Yeah, I
So it's
bet.
yeah, I probably sold things that are worth like 100 grand now for a
Yeah,
quarter.
right. Yeah, you don't even want to think about that, man.
No.
Oh my God. Well, I don't want to get into your age or whatever, but I'm assuming it's back, when it would have been beneficial if you held on to some of those. I'm assuming, they would the earlier prints or whatever of some of
Oh
those,
yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
definitely like late 70s, early 80s kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah, there
yeah.
have been some comics worthwhile.
So when did you actually start writing then? When did you start figuring out oh, hey, I think I can kind of do this or whatever? What made you kind of start playing around with that?
Honestly, at 17, at this point I'm in Alabama going to a high school that was literally in a cow field. Um,
No kidding.
no kidding. Just totally different from where I'd kind of like I moved there from Miami, so you can imagine there was a little culture shock going on.
Well,
Um,
sorry, you were saying this before. We kind of skipped over this, but you said you were an army brat, so you've been kind of all over the place.
Oh
So
yeah, dude.
like,
Yeah, we moved all over the
so to
place.
have a high school in the middle of a cow field is kind of funny. Like, well, I thought I saw it all.
Yeah, yeah. Because I thought I was going into Footloose. It was like, oh God, what have my parents done to me? Um, and
That's funny.
sitting I was actually in a annual staff, and sitting next to me, this kid was drawing, characters. And I was like,
Mm,
oh, he's a comic book artist, and back then, of course, you couldn't tell anybody you liked comics. And
right, I hear you.
so I kind of lean over and whisper, "Hey man, do you do comics?" And we immediately hit it off. It's Cully Hamner who started drawing comics at the age of 19. He still does it.
No kidding.
But back then we were just kind of like creating our own characters and writing our own books and just kind of goofing off. And I'm a little slow sometimes. So about 6 months of doing that, I go, you know what? This is what I want to do. Like this is what I want
Mm,
to do every day.
mm.
And it just became at that point at 17. Now I went and told my mom, and she wasn't too happy about it. Um, but at 17, it was like, hey, I decided I wanted to be a comic book writer.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And so how did that go for you? Like, like starting off, I mean, you had, your friend there, he was like drawing stuff, but I mean, were you guys like, yeah, let's put a comic together? Like, did you actually kind of like throw your own self-made comic book together and stuff? Like, how did you get started doing your own stuff?
Yeah, back then, I mean, we definitely did like we wrote entire issues and did that kind of stuff. And it never like back then it was a little bit tougher to kind of like do an ash can. It wasn't anywhere
Mm,
as cheap as it is to print now.
mm.
But we put together our own little black and white, send out pitches, that kind of stuff, just trying to get work. And then or trying to get somebody to publish it. And we had a couple of different people, small press publishers that would end up hiring us. And then of course, as small press publishers tend to do on a regular basis, they go out of business before a book could come out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. So I'd assume you had a lot of those like probably come up when you guys like, yeah, we're gonna be able to get this print, it's gonna be awesome, and then it just something comes up. Did you have a lot of those where it's like
Oh,
almost like so close and yet so far?
oh yeah, yeah, dude. We'd have those like we would leave a meeting and go have a special dinner because we're like, we finally made it. This is
Right, right.
18-year-old, complaining about, oh man, it took us 2 years. Like, and then like a month later, they're like, hey, listen, we can't really fund this. And you're like, oh, and then your dreams
Man,
die. Like
yeah. So how many books are, like do you think you guys like work through or kind of created or, kind of like in those first couple of years, like where you're kind of maybe getting not necessarily rejected, but like you just couldn't cross the finish line per se with some of them like, how many did you iterations of books or whatever do you think you went through?
to be honest with you, we didn't do a whole lot. I'd say like 2 to 4. Um,
Okay.
we did a lot more dreaming about it
Okay.
than we
Okay.
did actual execution of it, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. No, I hear you.
Like,
I hear you. I hear you.
there's a
Well,
lot of
I
sitting
mean,
around talking about it.
I mean, plus, I would imagine with technology today, is plus, digitally and stuff like that, it's probably, I hate saying easier, but like the barrier to entry is probably lower than what it was back in the day, like literally drawing frame by frame. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
that's what I would imagine, anyways. So
Yeah, I mean,
I,
totally
I, I,
different.
I would understand why there was less execution from a one or two man operation, especially for for those times. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
you're like way more limited to what you have. Like it's not like you have all the access to everything people have these days.
Oh
Like
yeah.
print on
Um,
demand and like all kinds of crazy stuff.
at 18, 19, like I mean, we both had full-time jobs, and like, you get a little hung up on girls,
I hear you.
like,
No, I hear you. Yeah,
there's
totally,
a
totally,
lot of other
totally.
things that kind of like keep you occupied.
So, like, so were you guys more looking to kind of get a job like in a comic book kind of publishing place, or would you rather get your own like comic book published? Like, what kind of angle were you coming at?
Well, back then, definitely, I mean, for both of us, it was Marvel or DC. Like we
Yeah,
desperately wanted
yeah.
to work for one of those guys. Um, and it's funny that it's kind of gone the opposite for me. It's like I love indie books now, and
I hear you.
that's my true love, and it's just funny. But I mean, back then, I mean, I think everybody starts out that way, right? Like you don't start playing football in the backyard thinking you're gonna not play for the NFL.
Exactly. No, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Totally. So what were what were some of your favorite books like when you first were buying them as a kid, or like maybe even when you started writing when you're 18, 19, 20? Like what were some of your comics that you'd say you might even be influenced by?
Oh yeah, I mean, first off was Uncanny X-Men by Chris Claremont, John Byrne. A lot of the Chris Uncanny X-Men to this day still, that one book
Mm,
that I will always love.
mm,
That for decades. And then stuff like Alien Legion, which a lot of people I don't think follow, but like Alien Legion was one of my favorite books. Absolutely love that book. And
mm.
then I dabble in stuff, obviously there was stuff like Watchmen and
Yeah,
The Dark
yeah.
Knight and, books like that. But yeah, Uncanny X-Men was definitely my go-to.
That's cool. That's cool. Like what is there anything that catches you now that you're like, oh man, this is a killer like series or whatever? Is there anything right now that's got your attention?
Honestly, like I dive a little bit into like more horror now than I think I probably would have suspected. Um,
Okay.
Rick Remender's doing a book, it's more like a superhero sci-fi book called Not Napalm Lullaby that I really like.
Hmm.
Um, Ice Cream Man is always a great book. Um, those are probably my two favorites at the moment.
Mm. How about like when it comes to writing? Is there anyone's like writing style that you like or that you would say that you're influenced by?
I mean, obviously when you start talking about that, there's so many influences on what helps you find your voice. Again, Chris Claremont, the Alien Legion stuff, Denny O'Neil back in the day doing the Question and Batman was amazing. Um, and then you kind of get into stuff like more recent, like Robert Kirkman, when he was doing Walking Dead and Invincible.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and then you start talking about books like Alan Dean Foster, I loved, Robert Hyland, I love. I can't write like any of those people, but that's not the point, right? Like you're just looking for your influences.
No, no, totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
Um, and so I know for me, like everything, I feel like everything media wise that I touch, whether it's honestly music, TV, film, comics, books, it all influences my voice.
Yeah, no, I get that. Totally. So like did you practice writing this like before when you were 17 and you decided, okay, hey, you know what, I want to do this. Were you practicing writing stuff before that? Were you kind of messing around like writing things down on pads or pencil and paper, whatever, like, oh, here's this world I'm gonna create. Like, did you kind of do things like that?
I did it all the time, but I didn't realize I was writing.
Oh yeah, because you said you were like daydreaming about it, right? Right.
Yep, I'm just
I
playing, right?
see.
I didn't want to
Yeah,
lose that
yeah.
thought. So like
Yeah.
I'm like when I was really young, I would do this on a regular basis. I'd write a ransom note to my mom and stuff like that. But but dude, I did all the time. Like, I mean, I remember at one point, like I had about 20 sheets of like 20 spaceships on each sheet that I kind of doodled out and
Oh
created this entire
wow.
like universe, science fiction universe, all these different
Yeah.
and stuff. And like I said, I mean, you don't realize that's creating and writing when
No, I
you're,
hear what you're saying.
you're just playing, and you're like, but
Yeah.
yeah, my mom had an old typewriter and I'd type away on that thing all the time, writing little stories and stuff. Usually, just little short stories, like almost like a single page, because that's all my attention span could handle.
Well, I guess which is funny because if that's kind of like your writing style, that's funny because that fits right into not that comic books has a short attention span, but like you said before, the writing in it, it's not a paragraph. The pictures are there to help you make the story or make the dialogue yourself in your own head, you
Oh yeah,
know?
I mean, yeah,
So
totally.
yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say, oh, is there anything that you do to like like practice writing? Do you like just kind of sit down and make yourself write whatever just for the sake of writing to kind of like make yourself get better? Like I've heard other people will like force themselves to kind of write to keep them sharp or to keep them, to keep their skills sharp, I guess, do you do things like that?
I mean, now it's more. I mean, because I've got to write every day to keep up with what I'm doing.
That's true. That's
So,
true.
so unfortunately, that's now I, the fans get to deal with me getting better as I'm writing. Like
So, have you messed around with like digital comics at all?
I mean, some of the stuff goes over to digital, and I've thought about, like the webtoons and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But I haven't really kind of dived into that. there's some weird IP ownership things
Yeah,
along
that's true. Yeah.
web series that
Yeah.
kind of spooks me a little
Yeah.
bit.
I
And
hear
it's
you.
funny, every time I've started doing like Brian Stelfreeze and Hoyt Silva and I have all, with those two artists, I've started doing and Tim Odlin as well. We all
Mm.
started doing a web comic. But then as we're going along, somebody sees it and goes, "Hey, we want to publish this as a book." So I've actually started doing web comics, but
So
every single
yeah,
time
right. And it ends up on a book.
it ends up as a book. Yeah.
That's funny. That's wicked funny, actually. You're like, why bother doing it on the web then?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you're gonna give me some money, I'll take it.
I know, I hear you. I hear you. So have you like looked into this is an interesting like an interesting topic. Have you looked much into NFT comic books? Are you
I've
familiar
seen
with
it.
that at all?
Yeah, I've seen it. I don't know. I won't lie. Like, I mean, I kind of get the gist of NFT and I understand it to a certain degree, but at the same time, to me, being an old school collector of like I have physical product,
Yeah, yeah.
the NFT thing is just like an odd change. And I'm watching it. I know who is it? Distillery is
Mm.
started out doing a lot of those out of the gate.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really interesting like the mechanisms and mechanics behind it because
mhm,
like you could NFTs have like these really interesting uh, well, they're all built off of contracts, but like I'll give you an interesting thing you could do with it. Like let's say you had a comic book and someone bought the NFT of your comic book and they're reading through it. You could have it set up to where like after they've read it 20 times, it'll unlock an extra like chapter in the
huh.
book and they could
Yeah.
be like, oh, you know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
so you could so like that's just one tiny little thing you could do with it that's interesting, like with NFTs. But like there's other things too, where if like say if you had super fans or like these like say if you had 10 super fans and this comic book release comes out and you could be like, all right, my 10 super fans are going to get 10 copies that we're going to give them of kind of like their own like custom cover of like the comic book, let's say.
Right.
And like they can pass on things to like their friends or whatever within it. And like I don't there's just a whole like trust me, NFTs are not going anywhere. I know like blockchain and crypto has gotten kind of black eyes with like different tokens and people ripping off other people or whatever. Like all of this is still the Wild West, but
Hmm.
this technology is not going anywhere. And like everything in the very near future is most likely going to be built off of it. So that's why it's just interesting because we've barely scratched the surface of what the blockchain technology really can do.
Oh yeah, dude.
So,
Anytime you have like groundbreaking technology like that, it's funny to watch humans because we can never really figure out what to do with it at first.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like,
What's funny? It reminds me of, have you ever seen that movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy?
oh yeah, yeah,
when they get that Coke bottle, they're just like, oh
yeah,
my, what is it? What do we do with this? And they're
yeah.
trying to figure out what to do with it. That's wicked funny. But I guess it's like that. It's kind of funny. I
Oh
never
yeah.
thought of I never thought of that before.
I kind of feel like the
Um,
same way with AI. Like, they came up with AI and they're like, well, what can we get it to do? And the first thing they're coming up with is like, well, let's, do everything that we pay creatives to do. And you're like,
right.
well, I'm not sure that's the first place you should go, but
No,
that's
I would say, as someone I've been playing a lot with AI lately, and it's it's not going to replace people, and I mean it's going to replace some people in the way that we are kind of just saying like, oh, I can get AI to write this article for me. What do I need this kind of writer now?
Mhm.
Um, but AI is this very powerful tool. And if people figure out how to harness it and grasp it and don't look at it as like, oh, I'm going to lose my whatever livelihood because of this thing, start using it as a tool to like, because I am a terrible writer. I'm lucky I spell my name right half the time. And like I can go into, Chat GPT and be like, hey, I need an article on this kind of topic or whatever, right? And I kind of give it parameters, and then whoo, it spits it out. And then I'll kind of I'll tweak it a little bit more, but I'm like, man, there we go. That's an article, But like if you're a writer, how I look at it as is like, why would I write 3 paragraphs if I can tell this thing the idea I want to get across with writing 3 sentences? Even if I'm an awesome writer, I'm gonna have this tool just do it because now I'm just saving time. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, because now I'm just kind of being silly if I'm like, oh no, I want to write this whole thing myself. Why? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, so even as an artist, you could kind of start with like general things like, hey, give me a landscape with these buildings and this and the other things. Like, boom, there you go. It's like, okay, I don't need to draw that now. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
there's like certain things that AI can come in and help you and like make your life easier. And where you're not like losing your, taking your, you're not getting yourself out of a job, but you're taking this tool that's enhancing your job and making you be able to work even more and faster.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I can tell you, like in the circles I run, especially in comics right now, like AI is like a big no-no. Like
No, I believe it. I believe
yeah,
it. Yeah.
DC's actually let go of people for being pro AI.
No kidding.
Yep.
Whew. Okay.
So, there's a big fight, and it's going to be an interesting, like I love technology, so like I'm following it, and it's kind of interesting to see because like what I don't disagree with what you said, but at the same time, I'll tell you, like from a writer's perspective,
Mm,
I love writing those 3 paragraphs.
I hear you.
You're a musician. Like I'm sure you can get AI to do what you can do, but don't you love playing it yourself?
Well, thankfully, AI isn't quite there with music yet, like with just the written language. It is around the corner with music for
Oh yeah.
sure. But with the written language, it's a lot. But I get what you're saying. I definitely hear what you're saying. And where you're like, I want to write those 3 paragraphs, and I totally get that. This is where it's going to be interesting because like Elon Musk said this, and I was like, I 100% agree with that. He was kind of like talking to the people that are like on the fence with AI being like, oh, I don't know if I want to use it. I don't, oh, it's evil or whatever. And Elon Musk is like, okay, that's fine. You can think that or whatever, but there's going to be someone right next to you that doesn't think that's using AI that's going to like outperform you 1,000 times over.
Yep.
And I'm like, he's very
Exactly.
right about that. You know
Yep.
what I mean? So that's where it's going to get interesting, where it's like, okay, yeah, you know what? You want to write your 3 paragraphs, but you're gonna have these other 20 guys or whatever that will do it in 3 minutes. So it'll be interesting because the human touch will obviously still come through. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah.
trust me, like Chat GPT, it kind of understands emotions and stuff like that, but it's still robotic-y. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like especially you as a writer, I'm sure you could probably read one of my articles and be like, yeah, no one wrote that.
It's
But
gonna be really interesting. I mean, AI is definitely like one of those things that's going to. I mean, I agree with Elon. The cat's out of the bag. Like, there's no
right,
way we're putting it back in there.
right.
And it's going to take a vast adjustment for a lot of people. And I'm sure we're all gonna, especially creatives are gonna fight it. Going down the road, and we will for as long as we can. But I mean, I hate to say it, but I think it's inevitable.
And here's kind of the interesting too, the thing that I discovered, but the more I've been using like AI is I don't know if we can actually accredit, we can't really accredit creation to AI. And here's why I would kind of argue this is because it can't do anything until you tell it what to do. And
Right.
you have to tell it, oh, I want you to give me an image with mountains with snow on it and birds flying over. Like, so you have to tell it, like, even though it's like producing the thing, it's not thinking of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's like the Industrial Revolution. It's like, okay, these machines are like producing, the stuff now. Like if we were thinking of the how they thought back then, it's like, should we have paid the machines then for doing the work? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
because that's how everyone's approaching AI. They're like, oh, it's doing all the work. You know what I mean? So like, it's
No,
not good
yeah.
then. It's not good because it's, so like, that's where I'm kind of coming from. It's kind of interesting. It's really this kind of industrial age, other the revolution that we're kind of going through now.
I think the interesting thing, currently in the US, if you write anything using AI, you can't copyright it.
That's that's interesting.
Yep.
I don't know
The
how I
law is
feel about.
passed.
I don't know how I feel about that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to go, okay, well, wait a minute. If like say you create a comic book completely using AI, which there is a company that's doing that.
Yeah, I
Um,
believe it. Yeah.
they don't even bother copyrighting. They're like, hey, if somebody wants to, use our characters, go ahead. We don't care. I mean, it's not like we spend a lot of time creating them.
Right, that's interesting.
Like,
That's interest that's another interesting approach also.
yeah.
Like, hey, go ahead, use it. Like, what does it bother us? It took us 3 minutes to write out the prompt.
It's pretty, well, actually, they've got, I saw them in C2E2 and the name of them is completely escaping me at the moment. But like, basically, they did softcore porn comics.
Okay, okay, okay.
And they had the AI write the story and draw the story
Hmm, man.
and made over six figures at that show.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Because I mean,
That's a good
dude,
day at the office.
yeah, and we know, like, I mean, when it comes to porn, like, dudes don't care where it comes
Oh,
from.
exactly. Yeah.
Yep,
That works for me.
yep. You're like, hey, this looks great. I want a copy.
No, totally. No, I mean, one thing that, because you're just kind of saying it, like wrote the stories out and everything. When I started kind of messing around with AI, I was like, all right, what's the limit of this, right? Because I started seeing it do all kinds of crazy stuff when I'm telling it, oh, hey, do this, do that. And so I ended up doing like this little experiment where I got the AI to basically create 32 planets, name the planets, have all different types of like elements and heat, cold, whatever. Then I
Mhm.
had to create like football teams on the planets and all these people. Like it was insane. I created this whole world and people and creatures and all this within like hours
Right.
of just typing stuff in. I was like, this is incredible. Like like that's why I was just saying, like it can't do anything unless you tell it what to do. That's why I was just like, this is interesting. Like,
Yeah.
it's definitely like you said, we're gonna be crossing a lot of bridges or barriers or whatever. Because I didn't know that copyright thing. That's really interesting. Like, how do we deal with that? You know what I'm saying? Like that, I don't know, it's just interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, technically, that would pour over into movies and TV too, right? So, like,
Right, totally.
if you have AI write the story and basically, I don't know if you've seen like Sora and some of the others,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but like if Sora creates the whole thing with no actors or anybody doing anything, is that copyrightable? Like,
Hmm.
and then if you put it out, like, does that mean like, okay, so the next Game of Thrones comes out and is completely AI generated? That means everybody on the planet has rights to do with it whatever they want?
Right, of the whole Game of Thrones catalog, or just
Right.
the AI Game of Thrones, or you know what I mean? Like it just
Yeah.
opens up a whole thing,
Yep. So
and
it's gonna
and
be
how
interesting.
much AI has to be in it in order for it to be not be copyrightable.
Oh yeah, we'll get into the percentages, I'm sure in the next couple of years.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's just a slippery slope with all this. It's interesting, and like also it's like if it's not copyrightable, like what is it? Like what's the license, or you know what I mean? Like what's it default to? Like.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Man, yeah, no, that's crazy. So like, I'm obviously then it sounds like you've kind of messed around with like doing like AI like art and stuff. Have you? Like, what's kind of your opinion of kind of how it reacts to what you tell it or whatever? Like,
I haven't toyed with that yet.
okay,
Just that most of the time I don't have the time to be honest, but like I'm more interested in like seeing how the image generation stuff works.
I
Because
hear you.
I've dabbled in the Hollywood circles, with consulting and that kind of stuff. And I can tell you like the gatekeepers on that stuff are a problem.
I believe it. Yeah,
Yeah. And so I was talking to
absolutely.
I was talking to an exec at one point, and this is before, the actual meeting started. So he's kind of like, "Oh, you're a writer. Man, did we screw you guys over on the last contract?" And I was like, "Well, first off, I'm not WGA, so you didn't technically screw me over, but like, how do you see that?" He goes, "The contracts they signed with the actors and the writers was basically like, we won't use AI to write scripts, or we won't use your likeness in a movie
Huh.
without, using AI without your permission.
Yeah.
We don't have any intentions of doing any of that. We're not going to use any of them for anything."
Hmm.
Like you said, it's prompt based.
Yeah.
He's like, "We don't need a script."
Hmm.
And so they're not going to have
Wow.
to write scripts. And he kind of at one point he almost had like a maniacal laugh. And I kind of started maniacally laughing with him. And he goes, "Why are you laughing?" And I go, "Because you don't understand that, like, if I get my hands on that technology, I'm going to do the same thing you just said. I'm not going to need you anymore."
Exactly.
I was like, I can start my own TV show online. I don't have to worry about distribution or any of that kind of stuff. And I can create my own TV show, and I don't need gatekeepers. I don't have to pour $20 million an episode into it.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
But for
Yeah.
me, like, looking down the road, obviously I think this is like 5, 10 years down the road. Like, it's going to give everybody the ability to create their own TV show or movie or comic or song, whatever it might be.
And yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So there's going to be a truckload of content. But as always, I think the best will rise to the top.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I
Yeah.
think that's going to
It's
be the people that are your typical creatives who are, the musicians and the writers and the actors and all those kind of people that know the nuances of all that stuff and how to make it resonate with people better than just some,
absolutely.
you know, and I hate to put it this way, but some exec at a studio who thinks he knows story but doesn't.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I love I love the idea of what it's going to do, like you said, for creative people, because like a lot of people have ideas in their head. Like that's what I love what crowdfunding did when crowdfunding kind of first came onto the scene. I love that it sort of leveled the playing field where it's like, okay, you know what? If I want to make a movie and now I don't need some executive to have to love my idea to in order to get it maybe on the screen now. Now I just need, some super fans or whatever to believe in me. Now I can get this done,
Yeah.
and that's what AI is kind of doing for a lot more people too. Like, maybe there's people that have no idea how to make animation, but now you can, through a prompt, you can type in some sentences and there you go.
Yeah. I
So
definitely,
yeah.
it's definitely going to change the landscape.
So what's like your workflow right now then? Like we're talking about AI typing and prompts. Like, so like what do you do right now then?
Well, I'm a little bit slower than most writers because I'm very methodical in my approach. And I think that's more my demons talking than anybody else. But usually I kind of start out with like a basic idea, and it might be a scene, it might be, parts of a story, an end, a beginning, those kind of things. And then actually build a one sentence log line based on that because I've found that like if my log line isn't interesting, my story's not going to be interesting.
That's funny.
Yep. And so then I
Yeah, so you
build
gotta
from
get
there.
you gotta get one solid sentence then.
Yeah, if your elevator pitch isn't solid to you anyway, if it isn't interesting to the person writing it, it's not going to be interesting to anybody else.
I hear you. That makes sense. I hear you.
So then I kind of build from there to where like, okay, here's my basic foundation. I'll write a paragraph and then I build all the way to I write an entire plot for the whole story. And then I'll break that down issue by issue, then page by page, and then panel by panel. And so like,
Hmm.
a little bit um lengthy, I think more than most people probably put into it, but that's just, that's what makes me happy. That's what I feel
Yeah,
best.
yeah. Do you always have like a set like page number in mind or anything like that when you're kind of working on that framework? Or do you
Most of
just
the time,
let
yeah.
it, yeah.
Yeah, most of the time I kind of understand, after all these years, I've kind of learned, like what is a 5 issue miniseries? How much meat do you need on that bone?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And obviously you always leave. I mean, comics, the downside to comics, especially when you're doing miniseries like I typically do for 5 issues, is you leave so much on the cutting room floor,
I believe
um,
it.
which is
Is
painful,
it
but at the same time, it helps it be more succinct.
is there like a standard kind of number of pages a comic book is in the industry or
Right now, it's 22 pages for the standard.
okay.
Um,
Okay.
with Plastic Death and Dolls, which is the book that's coming out now, I think we did 26 just because we
Okay.
wanted the room.
Is that a
Uh,
5 book series also?
yes, yes, that's five
Yeah,
issues as
yeah.
well.
So what's that one about?
That one follows Edwin. So Plastic was the original one. This one's kind of like a sequel prequel. So the first one was just called Plastic, and it followed a retired serial killer who was in love with a blow up doll, and somebody took. So of course, he has to come out of retirement to save the love of his life.
Exactly.
And the sequel is kind of like a split. So it's two sequels. So there's Edwin, the serial killer, just before he meets Virginia. So he's in full serial killer mode. And then 10-year-old Edwin. So you kind of get a glimpse into why he's a little off.
Mm,
What where did he come from and why does he not see things the way everybody else does? It's a weird book because obviously we're making a serial killer the hero of the book.
right,
But
right.
you know, in this one, Edwin's just kind of like doing his thing. He goes from truck stop to truck stop, getting odd jobs and and killing people. And he gets caught up in this he kind of likes the owners of this particular truck diner, and he gets caught up in a human trafficking ring, which he's totally against. And it ends up being like, hey, well, the only way to stop
Human
human
trafficking,
trafficking,
that's not cool.
yeah, human trafficking is against my moral code. I'm going to kill everybody.
Exactly. That's hilarious. So that what are some or either one or some of like the series that you've worked on, like, regardless of maybe how fans like, received it or whatever, like what was your favorite one to work on?
Well, I mean, and this is always an interesting question because I really do love everything that I've done. I mean, maybe it's not my
Yeah.
best ever, but I love the ideas that I did. So it's always kind of like trying to choose children.
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
But two of them always stand out to me. Plastic, the first one, because when I was doing that book, there was I'd say 50% of the people that my colleagues were like, if you do this book, it's going to end your career. It's too
Yeah, right.
Yep. And so Daniel and I did it anyway. Daniel's the artist on the book. And we did it anyway because we loved the idea. And we're like, hey, if this is the last thing we do, we're fine with it.
Like
And it was massively successful for us. And we still get money for trades every six
that's
months.
that's kind of funny. That right there kind of shows you it's like, you know, how do I phrase this? It's more than like go with your gut, but it's like, that friend of yours is like, dude, if you do this, this is the last thing you do, man. Like you're insane, right? And you're just like,
Yep.
well, I'm doing it anyways. Like, because like because it was just like I have to do this, or you liked it that much, you know what I'm saying? And then that very thing that guy was, your friend's like, oh, it's good in your career, and no, it's like the best thing that you ever did, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
it just kind of shows to like trust in yourself or whatever,
Yeah, and I mean, I
like.
think you have to kind of learn to like you said, you have to trust yourself, and this was the closest thing I'd done to this point that was kind of like closest to my true voice.
Mm.
Dark comedy, horror, a little bit disturbing, but a little bit off center.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and you find that like, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of weirdos like me out there that love this kind of stuff, and then we just leaned into it. So then we've created a whole universe around this,
I hear you.
and
Not,
then
not,
we bumped into Plush, which is one of the other ones that was like it was so out there that I still love it because it follows a group of cannibalistic furries. And dude, it was just so much fun because we were just way out there. You know what I mean? Like we were just like, hey, like, how far can we take this? And how can you make a group of cannibalistic furries the heroes of the story?
Man, that's some brainstorming sessions right there.
Yep.
Oh man. So do you guys like normally sit down then? Is that kind of like the I just had the tip of my tongue, like what you said about the cannibal furries. Like is that what you try to do? Like say like, hey, here's this topic. How far can we take this idea? Is that what you kind of like try and do?
Oh yeah. Well, Daniel and I both have and this is why we get along so well. We both have like a very dark sense of humor. And so we're constantly like trying to make ourselves feel a little uncomfortable and laugh at the same time.
I hear
So like
you.
if it doesn't make us giggle when we write, when we're working on it, it kind of like we
Yeah,
feel like we're not, hitting the mark.
man. Yeah, it's almost like you got to You got to find that thing where it's like, I really shouldn't laugh at this, or I really shouldn't let anyone know I laughed at this kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, totally. Yep. One of those things where yeah, you're giggling and you're hoping nobody sees you giggling at it. You know.
man, did you ever launch anything on like Kickstarter or Indiegogo?
Oh yeah, I've done 3 Kickstarters so far. I've got another one planned for next year. So we did a Narco and the original plastic and hardcover
Oh,
Kickstarter.
nice.
I did a Thomas River comic, which was with Brian Stelfreeze.
Mm.
And what else? Oh, and then we did Yumi, the one with Hoyt Silva. We did that one on Kickstarter as well.
Oh, so all of the, I'm assuming you got all of those funded then, obviously,
Oh
right?
yeah, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
that's cool. How do you think that Kickstarter is now as a platform now for people doing comics?
I honestly think it's the future.
Really?
I think direct to consumer is the way to go. I'm seeing more and more comic creators go there. I have a couple of, when I was at Heroes Con this year, which is in June in Charlotte, I talked to probably about 20 different comic creators, and all of them have decided to go uh, crowdfunding, however, Patreon or Kickstarter, however, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But all of them are going that way versus working for the companies and finding that they're making way more money doing that than working for, say, Marvel or DC.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm just surprised that more that they're using like Kickstarters because to me, crowdfunding seems to have like not died, but it seems to have kind of gone sideways a bit. Because I used to do marketing for crowdfunding campaigns back in like from 2015 to like 2019. And
Hmm.
after the pandemic, it really the kind of like the mechanics behind crowdfunding kind of changed a bit, it seems like. Like that's why I was wondering, like, if it's like, say, if like a someone that's like a newer comic book artist, or like if there's a newer comic book on the scene, do they have a better chance at raising on like Kickstarter, Indiegogo? Like,
Than making money doing it traditional published.
well, no, but like, say, like if you launch something, that's gonna probably go a little bit better than just say someone new on the block, right? Like trying to crowdfund on Kickstarter for their comic.
I mean, there's interesting, like we can probably talk about this for hours, but like really tough right now in comics to make any money, uh,
Mm,
no matter who you're working for. It's really
mm,
this worst we've probably seen it in my lifetime.
no kidding.
Yeah, comic, the typical floppies, you saw every month coming out, they're really struggling at the moment.
No
And so,
kidding. Okay.
yeah, for a new comic book creator to come out and try to like, I mean, you can do your comic, but you're probably going to be doing it for free.
Yeah, yeah. Or like spending your own money to print it or whatever.
Right. So then
Yeah.
you have to honestly weigh like is getting it printed a validation thing because maybe doing a web comic or doing crowdfunding might be a quicker way to making money.
Yeah.
So like I think you have to weigh those, like there's alternatives now than just the
Mm,
traditional comic kind of thing. And I'm
mm.
not printing the comic is like going through a typical publisher and stuff. I'm not sure that's viable for somebody just starting out if they want to like turn it into a career.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear what you're saying.
Because
Hmm.
I've got friends that are making so much money doing Patreon and Kickstarter right now. It's ridiculous.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
Well, they see that's the day and age we live in. Like that's why it's interesting because I saw a statistic the other day. It was like if you get 500 people giving you $50 a month, that's $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's not a lot of people, and that's not a lot of money a month. I mean, even if it was 1,000 people at $25, whatever, like 1,000 people is not an unrealistic number to think of for someone. Like, think of like I'm just lost my train of thought, but I mean, if there's like rock stars, or, like Stan Lee, he
Yeah.
definitely had way more than 1,000 fans. You know what I mean?
Oh
It's
yeah.
like there's so many people out there. 1,000 is such a small number. Like I'm sure, like that was actually the other thing I want to say about you, like kind of like going with your gut or whatever. But you also were like true to yourself. You're like, hey, this is what I like. This is what I want to write. And because you were true to yourself, that touch other people out there that are your fans, like, yeah, this is some awesome stuff. You know what I mean? Like, so when you're true to yourself, you will find those 1,000 fans. And yeah, I think a lot of people that are creative, we live in the day and age where you can earn your living doing that creative thing. you
Oh
know?
yeah, I mean honestly, like if you get 200 to say 300 backers on a Kickstarter, you're probably
Mm,
going to have a decent amount of money.
yeah, no, totally.
And
Absolutely.
that's crazy to think, that you only need 200 or 300. And I know, like, I don't know if you follow Lois at all. Incredible
No,
artist. Nobody knows who she is, but she might be technically making more money than any artist in the industry at the moment.
no kidding.
Um, she does her Patreon. She's got around 20,000 people that are members of her Patreon.
Oh my goodness.
Up if her cheapest is $5, and I think her most expensive
Wow.
is like 10. But you take 20,000 members per month, giving her $5 a month,
Times five's 100 grand a month.
100 grand a month. Now,
Man.
I've talked to her a little bit. She's a wonderful human being, which makes it even, more fun to kind of root for her. But
Yeah.
it took her 10, 15 years to get there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of the thing too. When people see that, they're like, oh, of course. Yeah. I wish I could do. It's like, you could do that if you put the time, like people don't realize like like you just said, she spent 10 or 15 years like building that up. It's not like it happened overnight, you know?
Oh no, exactly. I mean, Walking Dead. You hear people talk about Robert Kirkman, immediate success. And I was like, dude, you know how many years Walking Dead was coming out as a comic before it became a TV show?
Mm, mm,
Like that was
mm.
15 years. I mean, talking to him, and I've known Robert for a while now, and he's always been a great guy to me. Um, I mean, there was times where, Image wanted to cancel the book because it wasn't selling well enough.
That's funny.
Yeah,
You
now,
know?
overnight success. I'm like, no, Robert's been
Yeah,
doing this for
no.
about
Yeah,
five
he
years.
paid his dues.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well,
Man.
there's something to be said too about like, you talking about like believing in yourself and take Lois and Robert, two sides of the same coin kind of thing.
Mm,
And believing in what you're doing to the degree that you're willing to struggle for 10 to 15 years, believing that it's eventually going to strike.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's the thing too. Creative people, I think every creative person, whether they might maybe want to admit it or not, is some kind of an entrepreneur also.
Oh yeah.
And to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a special kind of crazy. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like you
Oh
got
yeah.
like I have so many people that tell me like, man, why are you so freaking optimistic, man? Like they're like, what, you think everything's going to work? I'm like, well, yeah. Like why, like why else would you not do it or whatever, right? But like,
Right.
and you have to have that short-term memory where like something fails and it didn't work. You're like, whatever, I'm just gonna try the next thing, like. But yeah, entrepreneurs are just a special kind of crazy. Like, they just don't know when they kind of quit, which is
And,
which can be a good or bad thing.
and if you ask me the secret to my success, I would repeat that. Like it
I hear
took
you.
15, 20 years to finally get it to where I was making enough money to do it professionally.
Yeah.
And a lot of, the first 10 years, dude, all I got was rejections.
Mm,
Not,
mm,
and people going, yeah, maybe you should think of something else. And not, me being not only hard headed, but like, I don't want to do anything else.
right.
Of course, I
Right.
had all kinds of jobs you can imagine, during that time. But every night I came home and it was like, no, okay, now what can I do to get me closer to writing comics?
Hmm. Yeah. See that's another thing too. I think for people to maybe know if they found their creative outlet, if it's like a sign that they found their thing, because you just won't stop doing it. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like if you're doing it for this, like if you're doing it not because if you're doing anything not because you like it for the sake of something else, eventually you're going to stop doing it.
Yeah.
Honestly. So like that's kind of the first and foremost thing is like if there's something you just can't put down, you can't stop. That's the thing you need to be doing for
Yep.
sure. Like there's so many, like I read a couple of like Jimi Hendrix books and a couple Eddie Van Halen books, and like the one thing that stood out to me then both of those books, both of them were like my guitar was never out of my hand. Jimi Hendrix literally slept with his guitar in his bed. And
Yeah.
like, and Eddie Van Halen, oh, like people would say, I never saw Eddie without a guitar in his hand. And it's like, yeah, you know that because you don't get that way without it in your hand 24/7.
I mean, and it's funny to talk about with the creatives because I think, the things we do, like honestly, all I think about is writing.
Hmm,
Like if I'm driving down the street, I'm thinking about writing. If
I hear
I'm eating
you.
dinner with my friends, I might be talking about other things, but I'm really thinking about writing. Like, and I don't mean that in like a negative way. It's
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
is constantly going, okay, like, I mean, subconsciously and consciously, my brain is always thinking about story, always.
Mm. Are you ever like talking with friends, whatever, and all of a sudden your subconscious kind of maybe puts a story part together and you're like, oh, and you kind of like pop
Oh
up a little
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. There's times where I'm like, hey, hold on, I got to get my pad out or get my phone out and I got to type
Yeah.
this down real quick 'cause I don't want to lose it. Yeah, that happens
Yeah.
all the time.
That's funny. Do you ever have to like lock yourself in a room or whatever, like to kind of create, or like are you just kind of can you kind of be anywhere and you know?
I can be anywhere and create. I found like the best for me is like make me take like a road trip by myself and I'll
Mm,
come back with an entire story.
that's
Because
funny. So kind of being on the road and just
yeah,
like
being bored
yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
like
Like
that's
so you kind of zone out when you're driving, right?
yep.
Yeah, I get that. I get
And I
that.
feel
That's
like
good.
there's that precious, it's almost it's really tough to duplicate at home, but like where your consciousness and your subconsciousness are working together.
Mm,
Because when you're bored, that's I think what happens. That's the zone. That's a sweet spot.
I hear you. I
You know,
totally get that.
and you can't type because you're driving.
Right.
Not sitting in front of a computer screen. There's no pressure to create. You're just creating.
Mm, mm.
And it's really difficult to duplicate that anywhere else.
Do you listen to music at all when
Oh
you're
yeah.
writing or anything? Yeah, yeah.
Music is a huge influence on my writing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed a friend of mine where he recorded an album with his band, but he also wrote a book that coincided like with the album,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
and he wanted people to like listen to the album as they read the book. I was like, dude, that's a cool idea. Uh,
Yeah.
I was like, that is a really cool idea. It took him like 3 or 4 or 5 years to finish the whole project, but because he was like, yeah, growing up, I would be reading a book and I'd have on Appetite for Destruction. You know,
Right.
as I'm reading the book, I was like, wow, I never thought of that. I never thought of like reading a book and playing an out, music that make that be the soundtrack to the book. I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah, and for me, like I always create a playlist for every story I'm working on, and every playlist is different.
That's funny.
And one of my friends was like, "Well, what was your playlist for Plush? Because that's so weird." And I was like, "You're gonna laugh, but it was disco."
That's
He's
wicked
like,
funny.
"What?" And I was like, "Dude, it was all disco." And then the next one was like, all grunge. And it's whatever fits that story and kind of like
Yeah,
vibe I want to put into it.
that's funny. Yeah,
Yeah, and so yeah,
but I could totally see the music shaping the vibe though, for sure.
oh
Like
yeah.
the mood and the scenes and everything. Absolutely. That's wicked funny listening to disco.
I mean, and when people are like, "What do you listen to?" and I'm like, "Man, it just depends on the day. Like, I listen to everything now, and it just depends on what kind of mood and what kind of vibe I want to be in."
I know it's crazy with like having just literally every like song that's ever been recorded at your fingertips. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Like it's
it's
just
brilliant.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's so crazy. I'm really surprised. Well, I mean, how big are like digital comics? Like, have the market grabbed onto them, or is it still like, not?
it's an
It's still.
interesting like that's an interesting question because like sales wise, no, it's still only about 10% of the
Mm,
industry.
mm,
Um, but it's also here's the flip side of that. Comics are pirated like crazy.
right.
So
So
something like
if they're pirated like crazy, that means the digital comics are probably way bigger than you know, but you
right,
can't track it.
right. We just can't get people
Yeah,
to pay for it. Like
yeah.
that's like I had a friend that was working on a book and he found out like the issue that he had just, kind of put out, sold only like about 20,000 copies. And he's like, "Hey, this isn't enough for me to make money. Like this is horrible." And
Yeah.
went online and found out that it had been pirated the same day over 300,000 times.
Oh my goodness.
And of course he went on a rant about it, but I was like, I mean, you can't control that kind of stuff. But he went on a rant,
Yeah.
like, if half those people would have bought this comic, we all would have been paid.
Well, see that's where the crypto comics come into play because no one can do
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. Yeah, I
You
see
know
where
what I
you're going.
mean? Like they are uncopyable. I mean, yeah, you could take a screenshot, but it's not the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, so they're uncopyable digital formats of the book. And kind of one of the thing I was saying, like, because obviously those 300,000 people are fans, right?
Right.
Like it. People would say, "Oh no, they're cheap or whatever." It's like, no, you know what? They get it out of convenience. It's easy to steal it, so they're going to do it. Like that's what put people out to stop downloading, like stealing music off BitTorrent, is like Apple came along and streaming services came along. And once it was easier to just stream it, everyone just stopped taking it, you know? And so that's what I was gonna say is like, I'm surprised there's not like a Netflix of digital comic books or whatever, like something like that. Like you'd think someone would try to do something like that.
I think there is, and it's beginnings of it. Like we talked about, like at the beginning of everything, humans can't figure out how to make it
Yeah,
work
yeah, yeah, yeah.
properly. And I think they're trying to figure out how to make as much money at it as possible versus like, hey, let's get this out there.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. So I was gonna say, like with the crypto comics, you could even build in, like, say with your super fans, it's like you could have like, hey, if you own like these set of comics, this will give you like, I'm trying to make something up here, like voting rights, or like, I'll show you early sketches or whatever of my story, and you can help shape and mold, the comic. Like you could, you know what I'm saying? Like you could do all kinds of like different stuff like that. Like I'm saying with NFTs, like by people owning certain ones, it'll give them like this voting power. Like again, the sky's the limit with what you can do with that stuff. But it's just a lot of untapped things and the problem is too, the average person doesn't quite grasp all that yet either.
Oh
So
no.
it's, what I mean? So there's still kind of a lot of problems with it, but
Yep.
but it's very interesting now. Um, so all right, so you have sorry, was it plastic? What was the follow-up from plastic? It was plastic,
Death and Dolls.
death and dolls. That's right. So when did you say that's slated for next year?
Oh no, that's coming out now. Yep.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Because you
I
said
think
there was something that you're working on for next year also too, but I don't know if
oh
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
mention that.
Oh no, publishers don't like when I
Yeah,
beat
yeah,
it.
okay, okay, okay,
So,
yeah. So when's Plastic Death and Dolls slated to come out then?
so I believe the first three issues are already out, and the fourth issue comes out next week, and then the
Perfect.
fifth issue will be obviously early October.
Awesome.
Um, and then next year, we kind of space these things out, so it'll be March for the next
Oh yeah,
one.
that makes sense. So then
Yeah.
do you kind of do stuff every 6-ish months or so?
Oh yeah,
Or yeah,
obviously with Daniel and I, it's definitely every 6 months, and then the more people I add onto the when I find the more time. So it just depends on how many projects I'm working at once.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, usually Daniel and I are just kind of like a once a year uh, event kind of thing.
So how long have you guys been working together?
Oh, over a decade now.
Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, we just kind of met online and we kind of hit it off and started doing books together. And then, he's an Englishman that lives in Spain and
That's
maybe the
funny.
one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. So when I pitched him a couple of books and he picked plastic, I was like, "Are you sure?"
Right.
And then we just kind of, he's like, "Oh no, dude, I love this kind of stuff." And then we just kind of like, dude, we've been doing it ever since. It's
That's
like
funny.
that's what we love doing. We love creating our own books. We both worked outside of, doing indie books. And, once you get in that corporate structure, it always gets a little odd. It's not as easy and it's not as fun.
Mm,
Um, you just get too many voices, going on like, oh, I don't know if I would do that. And it's like, yeah, well, Daniel and I kind of do whatever we want. And
right.
and we live and die by that, right? Like so like
Yeah,
we
no, exactly.
and so we both played a little bit outside, but we always come back because it's like, oh man, this is just too much fun. Like this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do when I wake up in the morning. I don't want to have to like answer notes from five different editors, like so that it's just different.
Hmm. That that's I like that insight for people to hear about that too. Because that must be hard to like actually be creative if you got people like, oh, I don't think you should do that, and then you got someone else being like, oh, you should change that. And it's like, well, you do it then, dude, or
Yeah.
or
Oh
whatever.
yeah.
It's like, why am I here?
Yeah. It gets tough. I mean, when it's, when you're getting notes and sometimes they conflict, and you're like, wait a
Yeah,
minute, you guys got to get together and figure out what you want here.
right, right.
Because I'm not one of those guys that likes to rewrite something 19 times, which I've done, and it's horrible, but you just don't, it kind of sucks all the juice out of it.
I believe it. Yeah. Yeah. See, especially if it's going off the rails of like what you had in mind to begin with.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah. No, hey, Doug, I mean, this has been a pretty awesome conversation, man. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to go over or cover, if you have any other projects that you've been working on.
Oh no, dude, no, we've covered everything. No.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. You have any fun, like, I guess what I would ask is, should a comic book artist, I mean, you kind of did touch base on this. Should they start with digital first just because of the buried entry and things like that? Even if, maybe someone can rip off their like digital comic or whatever, like, should they still go down that route?
Yeah, I think if you look back at almost everybody that's working, say for well, not I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of the creatives that are working for Marvel and DC now and making the big bucks, they started out by doing their own thing, completely self-published indie books.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
I would say yes, if you're a creator and you want to get into like writing or drawing comics, there is no excuse, like you said, now not to be doing your book online for free every week. You should be putting
Yeah,
out content. And that's what gets editors' eyes now, not necessarily how good you are. It's like, are you producing content and are you producing content regularly?
that makes
Um,
sense. That makes
yeah, there's
sense.
no reason why you shouldn't be doing a web comic at the minimum. Like
Yeah,
that should you should be doing it.
yeah, guys, I actually saw Ed Sheeran say this once, and I was like, wow, that's a really cool way to approach that too. He's like, I've written over 1,000 songs. He's like, you got to write all the shitty songs you got to get all those out of your system to get to the good ones. I was like, wow, that's really good. So it's like, yeah, you got no excuse. You should just be writing and pushing out content, and like, you're just gonna keep getting better and better as each week goes on.
Yeah, no, you've got to be doing it. And you've got to be, and if you want to do it professionally and get hired by somebody, you got to prove to them that you're doing it.
Yeah, no, totally. No, that 100% makes sense. Hey, Doug, I appreciate your time, man. It's been awesome having you on.
Dude, thank you so
Um,
much for having me on. I've enjoyed it.
yeah, no, it was awesome having you on. If you ever want to come back anytime, I'd love to have you on. So,
Oh
um,
yeah, dude, count
uh,
on it.
yeah, absolutely. But all right, you have any final words for the audience then?
No, I had a great time. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading, and we'll see you next episode. See ya.